So we've got one more topic before lunch and going to introduce Ben Walker now. Now, if you want someone who's dedicated to the NEC cause even, he's just back from a week delivering training in the Falkland Islands. So I reckon that's pretty impressive. So let's introduce Ben talking about taming commercial chaos. Thank you, Glenn. Can we seal the doors and stop any smells of lunch coming in? I'll be as quick as possible, and there's no penguins in this talk whatsoever. Oh. So we all know what I'm about to talk about. We can picture the scene. 6 months into a project, we've got 100 compensation events, only 10 are implemented. The other 90 are at some stage of their life cycle from notification. We've got quotations, maybe some outstanding, some are late. Maybe we've batted back a couple of quotations, revising, instructing them for revision because maybe we're waiting on an aged program that's maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks old. We're being peppered by early warnings. We've got test inspections we really should witness and defects that need correcting. And all of this on a backdrop of a frantic scrabble for a payment application where we're trying to head off disallowed costs. So there's a lot going on, and this talk really was about how we approach the taming of that chaos and making sure that we don't end up doing yesterday's work tomorrow, and that dreadful feeling of being out of control and then having to come in on the weekends to keep things going. I apologize for the animation, it's becoming fairly standard. So before we think about, I did put in the intro there that it was about modern contracts. So I just want to make that distinction between one person's view of traditional contracts versus modern contracts. And I wonder, I know what this guy was thinking 20 odd years ago whilst they were stood on site. They were thinking, I wonder how much delay and disruption on this job's going to cost us. And that's because we weren't doing much admin. We were building stuff. And I had lots of other questions like, what contract? And sometimes I'd seen it, sometimes I hadn't. Those I did see weren't really written for me. I couldn't follow them in a particularly useful way, and they just seemed to sort of waffle on about lots of long sentences, 400-word long sentences, and it just didn't seem like something that I needed to engage with. And I was aware that projects sort of got finally administered in a period after we'd all gone home by people that weren't there to witness what actually happened. It sort of seemed very... I'm worried about how many people are still laughing. So this has all seemed very transactional and was full of shocks and surprises, not least of which was that protracted final accountant dispute. And again, I think I'd come fresh from the office where I'd seen this letter for the umpteenth time that said, oh, here are the direct costs. We'll let you know what the indirect costs are when we know them. So, bit dismal. But one sunny day, I remember first engaging with NEC. Now this, by difference, as I'd call a modern contract, primarily was much more a manual for successful project management. So the emphasis there was about influencing the future rather than administering the current and the past. And this seemed much more attractive to me. It was in plain English. Sentences had punctuation and bullet points and simple words. And it seemed to be far more procedural and prospective. So it felt like something that we would follow and embodied good practice rather than unpicking things after the event. Now, this did strike me, though, as needing a bit more time in the office. And there was a reward to that, which was greater certainty of outcome, which genuinely, even in the early days, did seem to come to fruition. But that didn't really help me when I was spending Saturdays and Sundays keeping up with the admin. And it did, though, yield, I think, a far shorter wrap-up process. So we weren't continuing to argue about a job years later. And therefore, we had fewer shocks. But my overriding early observation was there's an awful lot of admin to do with these contracts. So why? Why are we doing it? Well, the great late Dr. Martin Barnes said something at a conference many years ago that etched itself into my mind, and it was this: that project management is about influencing what hasn't happened yet. Everything else is just administration. So do you want to actually, if you call yourself a project manager, do we want to be influencing the fate of the project, or are we just going to record and possibly argue about it afterwards? So with this fewer shocks and greater certainty, And this injection of project management into the day-to-day and making it a commitment rather than something in a white paper that we would ignore. So is there more admin within NEC contracts? Undoubtedly there is, although I'd caveat by saying during the project there is more admin. I think we're taking perhaps 100 units of admin after the project, and we're making it maybe 60 units of admin during the project, but with all the benefits of having the people there who were actually building it. So is it more than needed? No, I don't think so. I think it's the appropriate amount to achieve that proper level of project management. However, sometimes people like to make it complicated and add a bit more. And then we could be doing triple, quadruple the amount of admin that we need to do. And then we get chaos again. And as a young engineer under this actual viaduct, I made two decisions in my life, early decisions. One was that on balance, even though I was there on Sundays, it was worth doing. And it seemed to me accessible and I could see the vision and the goal of it. And so I thought, yeah, let's follow this. So I did engage with it. I got training and I started to try and understand the procedures. The second decision I made came about of circumstance because I didn't like being there on the weekends, every weekend. And so it was under this actual viaduct that contract event management and reporting was born, later called CEMAR. And when going about putting together a system like that, I don't know anything about software or coding or anything like that. To me, computers were irrelevant. It was much more about finding a system to embody the process. And so sitting back in 2003 and thinking, if this is going to work, what are the core elements of this that need to be addressed? And it struck me, there's some more paperwork. It struck me there were three things that to make NEC a success, you really needed to invest in. The first one was culture. And so I'm going to unpack these a little bit in a moment, but just to give you the three headlines. The second one was knowledge. And the third one is having a discipline. Now, I don't mean to sound too draconian on that. It's about keeping up with what the obligations are you signed. Without these three things, we just get chaos. And then it becomes a box-ticking exercise, and it's not adding any value. And, if I pulled something out at random, I could say the accepted program feels a bit like that sometimes. And there are really practical things we can do to make sure we don't fall into that trap. And it was very interesting to hear from David earlier about some of the challenges around that. So let's unpack it a bit more. So culture, firstly, I don't think it's naive to seek it. When I first stepped into an NEC contract, my first experience, I thought it was a bit naive and a bit cuddly and a bit fluffy. I didn't really know what it meant. Surely I was there to mix up mortar and carry things around site. So I'm not really sure where this sort of mutual trust and cooperation came in. But it is something that is actually a prerequisite for many areas of the contract. If we think about as a contractor being instructed to change the scope, you've got to follow that. It's clause 14.3. We've received it. We've got to follow it. 20.1, core obligation, provide the works in accordance with the scope. 27.3, get really geeky. Obeying an instruction. So there's all these reasons why I've got to get on. That feels uncomfortable, but it feels uncomfortable to, at the time, a local authority accounting team who was saying, Ben, what are you doing? Why are you writing all these instructions without getting a price in advance? I said, that's fine. Do you prefer value for money or budget certainty? Because we can do a £20,000 compensation event, or we can keep, and I can explore the costs now, or we can get on with it and it'll be £1,000 roughly. Which did you prefer? So there's all these sorts of cultural shifts that we need to make it work. I think, I don't know who said this, it's probably off wiki somewhere, but culture is definitely the shadow of our leaders. And we heard that a lot yesterday in the NEC conference yesterday, and again echoed this morning. And a nice quote that I heard was, the best we can expect from our teams is the worst behaviors the leader exhibits. So I think we all have a role in making sure that we really check ourselves and make sure that our conduct is appropriate. And I've seen lots of articles written about achieving mutual trust and cooperation. I think my favorite And a sort of 80-20 rule thing on this is just do what the contract says. It's not supposed to be a good read or exciting or novel. Be boring, be predictable, do what you're supposed to do. And then I think that sort of is a really good way, actually, of achieving mutual trust and cooperation. The second one is knowledge. Get trained, know what you've got to do. You can't do what you're supposed to do if you don't know what it is. Involve experts, ask questions, get rid of the ego, and just ask questions and work out what we need to do. And one of the things that always sort of is a little jarring with me when I give NEC training is we talk about NEC being easy to follow, intuitive to follow, user-friendly structure, I think is what we say, isn't it, Richard? Yeah. And I do jars a little bit, because at least in some of the Latin contracts, although you can't understand the clauses, you know which ones they fit together with. So we don't say in clause 60.1 brackets 1, have a look at 14.3 or 20.1 or 27.3 or 63.9. We don't see that fit. And I think that's actually a bit of a challenge, and is possibly the reason we get some wacky Z clauses, because perhaps people without the broader understanding of how the whole thing fits together, we can get these Z clauses. So we need to use the index. As an examiner, Rob and I, we've put the same thing, examination reports over the years about just look at the index. It gives you a clue, choose your words, and go and find those other clauses. So not knowing your obligations and failure to discharge them, major cause of dispute. Also, get on my soapbox with this one. Using language, don't bring in language from old contracts. There's enough language in NEC. Some of it we need to get used to. The definition of plant equipment, don't mix those up. Don't talk about snagging. I won't steal any Neil's thunder. Practical completion, what does this mean? And the verbs are important. I know what acceptance means or doesn't mean when we accept something. If we start approving or agreeing, what does that mean? We'd have to start paying people to tell us what that means. So acceptance, you have a carve out. So stick to the language. And the third thing, having a discipline to do all of these things, creating a rhythm of business, getting your actions done, not rolling yesterday's work into tomorrow. And have indicators to check yourself and know when you're in it, it's very difficult to know where you are. We found that earlier on when we were putting our stand up at Gather. You need someone to stand back and say, no, that's around the wrong way. So know where you're falling behind, have some sensible key performance indicators, make sure you are on your project as well as in it, particularly if you're leading it. Make sure you have access to good records and systems. These are really the oxygen that make things tick. And take early intervention if you spot poor knowledge or poor behaviors. So how can software help us do this? It was in the thing, so I've got to talk about it. So how can software help us achieve this culture, knowledge, and discipline? Well, I think there's 7 things it can do for us. So that's all I could fit on the slide at a reasonable resolution. So configured and structured to contract rules and procedures. So I think I used to get frustrated before my time in the IT world, or software world, with people coming to the office and saying, yeah, we can build you that, Ben. What would you like it to look like? I'm thinking, no, I want someone to turn up with it 85% finished. So making sure that it's already embodies the NEC procedures or the NEC requirements, but is flexible enough to be tailored to your specific contracts. We don't want cut and paste. Provides consistent standard for records and communications, single truths, accessibility, available, controlled and audited. You can start to see how each of these speak to either culture, knowledge, or discipline. Builds a data set with actionable insights and learning. So until this 4th point, we're not necessarily talking about software. We could be talking about just a well-run administrative system. Everyone talks about digitization. This is more than just taking a photograph of your meeting minutes, which is what I used to do for a long time until Will told me that wasn't digitization. So now we're building data sets with structured data. We're not talking about forms here. We're talking about structured data. We create forms electronically because they look like the paper we're used to. Let's break that paradigm and actually use the full potential of digital. We achieve compliance through workflows and validation. We include a safe place to practice, to train, to fail, to test, to gain familiarity with what we're doing. And software never forgets to remind you and bring that cadence and rigor if we use it. Now, there's a little bonus benefit here, and I call it the problem of politeness. Could anybody give me which clause this is? 15.2, was that? Spot on, yeah. What we mean is this, isn't it? I was mobilizing CEMAR on a project, I think it was 2012, 2013, and I was talking to the contractor, and it was about 4 or 5 weeks in, and just by chance, the project manager walked into the room and banged the desk and said, "This is how it's going to be, is it?" And I shrank into my chair, and his problem was that we must have, the contractor he was talking to must have an army of lawyers writing letters. And the contractor, in a very sort of jovial voice, "Oh, no, it's not that. It's Ben's fault." We've turned this system on, that contract management system, and the disarming effect that had was incredible. And it made me think, yeah, this does have a role. Software has a role in what we're doing, because the disarming effect of, "Oh, so you're not writing it?" No. So it's just a standard set of stationery that we're communicating on. "Oh, well, that's fine then." And it meant that you could be unapologetically clear and precise, and unambiguous and standard and consistent. And it was a real boon for, I think, achieving that clarity. Very interested to hear Kat Ferguson this morning mentioning CEMAR, where two practitioners sat next to each other. I had a very similar situation out on site with a technical issue where software becomes a bit of a barrier. So we've got to be very, very cautious of that. Use it to aid an understanding and to formalize communications and records. If you use it as a barrier between you and you just throw sort of things over the electronic fence just on a Friday afternoon or Christmas Eve or whenever it might be, that's not going to do anything to improve trust and cooperation. It will just erode it. So we need to be careful of that. And I did, horses for courses, right? If we've got a complex technical thing to be discussing, let's do that on a whiteboard with a coffee if we're co-located. Okay, we talked a bit about contract management. I do want to go into record management because I want to stick to the things that we said that we'd talk about. So let's talk about record management. I think, Mr. Jarrod, you said this. I don't know if you said it first, but I'm going to attribute it to you. So we shouldn't be spending time arguing the facts. Sounds very sensible, doesn't it? But we do, don't we? We do. Every day we spend time arguing facts, and it's a real shame. And I think Max Abrahamson said this far, far better with records. But what are they? Well, they give us the oxygen to actually administer these modern processes. They weren't so relevant in some ways with traditional contracts where there was just a great fog. But now we've got all these open book records, transparency, and we need the records to be there. Otherwise, we're extrapolating or interpolating, and this just causes a breeding ground for dispute and argument. So what do we mean by record? Well, I think there's two types. I think predominantly it's helpful maybe to have this distinction between the two. So I think it's helpful to think about our QHSE records, which are all about proving that what we've built is in accordance with the scope and making sure that we are safe in doing so. And then the second kind is much more of a story. It's a narrative as to how we built the works, who was there, what equipment did we use, when were the materials brought in, and what held us up, what tripped us up. And I'm not just talking about listing compensation events here. I'm talking about the whole picture. Far more credible to track 100% of your delay and then make an argument for however much of it is compensatable. So that commercial narrative, I think, is distinct. It's much more about the how, it's the story. But I think there's a gap. We're really good at QHSE, and we're absolutely diabolical at commercial. Why is that? Why is it? Well, I think firstly, QHSE is law. We've got to do it. And if people don't do it, things fall over or collapse, people get hurt and injured and killed. So it's really important that we do that. But is not doing commercial records, does that mean no one gets hurt? What about the 49% of lost working time due to depression, anxiety, and stress? What about the 3,100 businesses that went bust till August last year in our sector? So there's a huge impact on not doing the commercial record keeping well. And it's just so basic. It's not robot dogs or drones with LiDAR. I mean, I would like a robot dog, but I think there's so much great innovation in our industry, and I'm 100% with it. But probably 80% of the benefit is still in the simple stuff. I don't just think it's about that. I actually think we've done it. I think we believe we have the digital approach already there, and I don't think we do. So if we're using QSHE management record tools for capturing those types of records, which we do very well, we're trying to use the same software or approaches to commercial, and many of us don't. We still use carbon triplicate, bits and pieces lost in the van, fragmented, inconsistently captured. This is causing us a real problem when we get to commercial procedures, and it causes chaos. Top reason for dispute: poor contract admin. So unpacking it a little bit, as I have done with Will and Ellie and the team at Gather, we've been thinking about what is it? What in essence are we doing not quite getting right? And it struck us that when you think about a concrete test result or a risk assessment, the format of capturing is the same format in which we digest them when we look at them later. When we want to retrieve a record in a QHSE world, we bring it back and we consume it and look at it and then we put it back in the file. That is not true for commercial use cases. We might need 15% of 100 records in aggregate in order to justify the accounts and records of defined cost for a particular compensation event. We might want to aggregate things from an application for payment. We might want to trend some reasons for access issues so that we can do a lessons learned piece later on. We might be looking at the next accepted program submitted for acceptance, and we might be looking at that document thinking, is it practical? Is it realistic? What empirical productivity of the sites have I gleaned in order to project them forward? We might be estimating the next project. We would have our own version of SPONS if we captured commercially our records appropriately in accordance with the standard method of measurement. So lots of good reasons for doing this. And of course, modern contracts are giving us tight timescales to do this in a contemporaneous matter whilst we're trying to do all those other things as well. It's no wonder we can get ourselves into chaos if we're not disciplined with the right knowledge and the right culture. So just briefly to take us to break, I just want to touch on a few areas where records have a value. And traditionally, in retrospective application, we use them for substantiating payment. We use them for justifying defined cost. We use them for arguing disallowed cost one way or the other, for reporting progress, and for retrospective assessment. And these are kind of very point events. And again, we go and we get them, we aggregate them to prove something. But NEC is very prospective, isn't it? And interesting conversations on LinkedIn about, well, so how relevant are records then to the prospective elements? And I think we kind of covered it in that little bit I just mentioned there. In aggregates, they provide us productivity insights. There's a need for, we believe, saying at the start of each shift, we're going to do 100 meters or something, and meters is the chosen method of measurement because when we do 60 meters and we give reasons for not doing the 40 the other 40 that we thought we were going to do, we're capturing that in a standard way, a way that speaks to the commercial operation, a way that can be have reasons tagged to it and aggregated. It can be linked back to the schedule of cost components. There's so many things that can be linked to the program, so many ways. Then we suddenly have that granular day-to-day activity that we're doing anyway in support of things like the program. So then the program becomes a bottom-up exercise. I won't ask you to show hands as to how many of you parachute a planner in once a month to create a P6 program. So really growing the programs from the bottom up, getting ourselves to a point where we can submit and accept on the same day. I think at that point, program will really work for us. And that's true for compensation and workshops as well, perhaps. Workshopping these things out so that we're submitting and accepting on the same day. I mentioned KPIs for Chaos. One of my KPIs for Chaos is how many times do we instruct a revised quotation? How many times do we withhold acceptance to a program? Why are these things surprises? Allocation to task and reasons for variance. So now we have the oxygen to do prospective compensation events. We have the ability, we have contemporaneous programs with real logic in them. We have the ability to forecast to the next assessment date with confidence, and a reduced amount of disallowed cost. I mentioned programs as well. So there's a bit of a paradigm shift, I think, when we detach ourselves from paper and we start thinking in terms of the relationship between different sets of structured data and how we bring them together, whether it's resources out on site, their allocation to certain activities, the method of measurement by which we track progress, and the rules of the game, however Z-clause they might be, can be embodied into that. We spend so much money honing within an inch of its life, NEC and procurement and Z-clauses, and then we don't match that investment with tooling and training. Not always, many times we do, but it's not as perhaps front of mind. So I appreciate, it's almost like vitamins rather than medicine, some of this. So 6 things we could do today. I think we could embrace commercial record management as important as QHSE. We could improve the health of our projects and the people delivering them. We can match the investment in contract strategy with operational solutions for making it successful. We need to elevate the importance and visibility of field activities and the people operating them. We could look to scope. I think volume 2 of the user guide, chapter 3 with the codified structure for scope, there's possibly areas of that where we might want to supplement it. I'm going to do something on LinkedIn soon on that, I think. We could look perhaps at a competency framework. There's probably lots of project manager accredited individuals in the room. How about something for shift supervisors, capturing records on site? They're doing it with energy and vigor because they know why they're doing it. They're not being phoned up by an angry QS 2 weeks later. Where's my record for this? They're being contacted routinely every morning. Great job yesterday. Was it an access issue then? Yeah, can I have some extra photos? We're building records as we go. And I think those same individuals need incentivization and recognition. And I'm not resistant to the fantastic new advances in, I was looking at some the other day, camera-mounted inspections that are intelligently seeing the progress of work. I mean, this stuff is fantastic, but it's not going to determine, at the moment at least, between something that's compensatable or not, or that richer narrative and context as to why we haven't off-hired that excavator. So, in summary, the key benefits: supports a healthy culture, improved commercial assurance and compliance, giving us the knowledge we need, and a framework for learning and sharing that knowledge. We end up with fewer disputes, healthier people, and an increased productivity from actionable insights. So really shifting that paradigm around why we keep records. And we've got 3 minutes for questions, so no lunchtime rush.
I think with all of those 3 presentations, there's so many little elements in all of those. I'm so glad we're videoing these presentations, because in a couple of weeks' time, we'll all be able to go back, as sad as that might sound right now, but I certainly will. And I think, there's some real great nuggets in all of those 3 presentations. We have got a whole 2.5 minutes. So any questions or any observations anyone wants to share at all from anyone? Mr. Gerard, you've been the quietest you've ever been in about 15 years, and you were quoted there. Anything you'd like, observations on anything you'd like to share? Now's your moment, Rob. Okay, any questions, observations anyone wants to share, particularly on Ben's last segment there?
Do I have to copyright that man when I include on my slides the best way to achieve mutual trust and cooperation is to act as stated in the chuffing culture? Fantastic one.
I did not recall chuffing is a defined term, but the sentiment. Yes, excellent, indeed. Lunch will not be served for 2 minutes, so don't think asking a question, you're not going to get out early. So any other questions, any thoughts, observations, just from that last segment from anyone? John?
Linking the two talks together, it struck me that in terms of that, what the AI and linking progress, defects, etc., to payment, and Ben's talk, there's a link there. I'm not sure if it's AI. It's coding completion in digitally, and then linking that to payment and records. And there seemed to be a big link there, and taking out the subjectivity of, oh, is it complete or not? Because if you can code it, well, providing it's done correctly, that's not a discussion. It's finished. Yeah, it's done. You get paid as an activity. So there seemed to be a link there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think digital does two things for us. It improves how we currently do things, makes it more efficient, transparent, auditable, but it also opens up an opportunity for a paradigm shift. And to do that, we mustn't be lazy and simply replicate what we've done on paper. We must rethink what the outcome is we're trying to achieve. And in amongst that is the potential for AI and smart contracts. But we'll maybe do the first one first.
I think the cloud-based systems have got a real responsibility here. We're always on the case. So great cloud-based systems out there. They've got to be contractually compliant. So one of the trouble that these systems have, we've got Contract B, we've got Thinkproject, we've got RPC here today, chat to them. One of the problems they've got is when I talk to them and say, okay, in the system, if they don't respond within that timescale, and you remind them, you notify it. If they don't respond within a further timescale, it's deemed accepted. So just make it deemed accepted in the system. No, we can't do that. Why not? Because the clients won't like it. But it's true. And it's true, contractually it's true. And even though it's not deemed accepted, for example, in the system, then some super user at some point has got to go in and press the button to say, well, it is deemed accepted, we can't get around it. So sometimes, clients are sort of kicking back on these great systems who are trying to do the right thing, and the clients are saying, no, we're not having that, and if you refuse to do that, we'll go somewhere else. So we've got a responsibility to make sure that, these systems that are putting great systems in place are actually allowed to do their job. Okay.
One of the things that resonated with me, actually, when we talk about systems, because, and you mentioned this in your talk, Ben, is that from time to time we do hear those words, a system, is that too contractual? And as we start moving into that whole AI space and becoming even more digital, are we going to get that same comment being used as a way to, where people are reserved from moving into systems? So I think the words that resonated with me was that, no, it's not too contractual, unapologetically clear. That's what I really liked when you mentioned that. I think that's what we need to keep our focus on.
Too contractual. It's a great phrase, isn't it? If you take contractual as being following the contract, how can someone be too much following the contract? And on that note, lunch.